Einstein 100 years ago, 98 years ago, I think it was, gave a recipe for a prediction of how you might be able to detect the kind of gravity that he described in his famous 1916 paper. To him, gravity was not a force of attraction between objects, as Newton would have you think of it. Gravity is the distortion in the fabric of space and time. And if I have a massive object, I'm distorting it deeply, and some other object comes in the vicinity, it kind of falls into that distortion.
Right.
So you're really just staying with the flow. And I think it was one of Einstein's disciples who came up with the phrase, mass tells space how to curve, space tells matter how to move.
Oh, okay.
There you go. And so now, if you have a disturbance in this fabric of space and time, it will emanate forth as a ripple moving at the speed of light. And that ripple that was discovered and announced today has been traveling through the fabric of space and time for 1.3 billion years. And it is the record of the collapse of a double black hole system coalescing into one black hole. And that is a major disturbance in the fabric of space.
So in order for that to be detected, it would have had to have been this giant, like obviously anything probably throws off gravitational waves.
Yes, anything.
Then to make it
correct
to reach here.
It's got to be big enough and bright enough, if I can use
like
that word.
A tsunami of gravity.
Correct. And so badass black holes coalescing is what did it. And in fact, in the last instant before these black holes coalesce, it is radiating so much energy, it is more energy than all the stars of the universe combined. But it only does it for a quick fraction of a second.
It's enough
before they coalesce. But it's enough to give that little jiggle, wait 1.3 years, and it came across the detectors, changing the length between two mirrors that are suspended on very thin wires in multiple observing locations in the world.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it'll Nobel Prizes all around for everybody. Yeah,
I gather. So what does this mean? We always hear how important these discoveries are. What will this teach us?
Well, it is. I don't know that there's anything left that Einstein predicted that we can still end up finding out is true. Everything has been correct. And in fact, let me tell you how smart Einstein was. In one of his equations, he put in a term that he later regretted putting in, and he called it his greatest blunder. This is a term that he looked at his equations, and his equations showed that the universe had to be either expanding or collapsing.
Right.
Now, no one had any idea that the universe, which is everything, would be doing anything.
Yeah, it's just there.
It's just there, right? So he says, this can't be right. Let me put in this term. It's a legitimate mathematical term, but physically, what the hell are you doing, Albert? And he says, this term will help stabilize it from collapse. Okay, and it's a pressure force to push outward, and that'll stabilize it. Later on, just a couple of years later, Hubble, the man after whom the telescope was named,
telescope the man,
discovered that in fact the universe was expanding, and he didn't need the term because he could have predicted that the universe should either be expanding or contracting, but he didn't. He put in this term. He said it's his biggest blunder. Now, you know what Einstein's actual biggest blunder is? Saying that that was his biggest blunder. Because in fact, in 1998, we discovered a pressure in the universe pressing against gravity that is exactly the term that he put in.
It wound up being what he said.
His biggest blunder is thinking he made a blunder. That's how smart he is. That's badass smart.
Who was his closest competitor, if you could even use that word, back in those days?
I mean, Isaac Newton.
Yeah, and
I mean, in his time, nobody.
He didn't have a contemporary.
No, they're really smart people at the time. The discoverers of quantum physics and there's a guy named Eddington. They're very smart people, but none of them rivaled Einstein. And you got to go back in time to Newton. Isaac Newton.
And I think
find someone who rivals his intellect.
And when you look at people that rivaled his intellect back then, I mean, knowledge of the universe wasn't all that reliable. So I don't know. It's amazing that Newton was able to come up with what he came up with then.
Yeah,
in those days.
This is what makes towering geniuses towering geniuses. They don't make little incremental progress on whoever came before. They make huge progress.
Right.
And there's there's a quote from Newton that says, "If I can see farther than others, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if you ever really study Newton and then everybody else around him, we really need to restate that. So if I can see farther than others, it's because I'm surrounded by midgets. Okay, so, I mean, he really was not simply standing on shoulders of giants. He was the giant.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Unquestioned. So for me, I would rank Newton very high, Einstein a moderately distant second, and everybody else that is famous as scientists a distant third to him.
Mm-hmm.
That would be Feynman and Eddington and Niels Bohr and Schrodinger and a lot of names. Each one of them got Nobel Prizes for major discoveries made back in the first part of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Einstein was kicking ass.